did
It's
start a
good.
show one time and forgot to hit the button.
Oh
We had
yeah, we've
I didn't
done
get too
that.
f- I didn't get too far into it, fortunately,
That's good.
but
We've
they never
done
let
it
me
a
forgot
whole
it.
show.
Every time we try to interview Bill Konkoleski, something happens where we either don't record or we talk to him and all of a sudden it just ends. Or
Yeah.
Strange things happen when we podcast.
Well, Bill's one of those. He's kind of a strange guy. I mean, he's got a really weird last name for one thing.
yeah,
But can you spell it?
No, no, I don't even know how many syllables are in it.
Konkoleski. 4.
yeah. But we're gonna do the normal thing where we'll just say and welcome to the show, Steve. We won't do the welcome to 222 thing. We'll do that later. We'll
Yep.
just get into the
Okay.
interview,
Okay.
and then at the end, we'll say goodbye, and then we'll say goodbye to our listeners, and I'll stop recording, and then we can talk.
Okay.
You know how that goes.
Yeah. Yes.
He's a pro. He's done it 100 times.
Yeah,
Even in person.
yeah.
Right? That's the
Well, we
best.
can't now that you move so far away. We can't just drive up and see
No.
you.
Well, I might be in the neighborhood someday.
Yeah.
Oh, here comes
Oh,
Rosie.
oh.
Hi, Rosie. Look how cute she
Strange
is.
thing on your head.
Snuggle time. She wants to be a star.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't step on the keyboard now, kid. Come on. Come on. Let's not disconnect.
I
Right?
saw where people put plexiglass over so the cat, or even a fake keyboard.
To fool the cat.
Yeah.
That's funny. Oh my gosh. Alrighty. Are we ready, Joe? Let's do this.
I'm ready. The sound's pretty good.
Rosie's in the camera. It's
Oh
okay.
well.
We'll just record. All right.
All right. You ready?
Yep.
I'm ready.
Okay. Give me a second here. Let's have some dead air so I can edit it and then. So welcome to the show, the fabulous Steve Ward,
One and only.
the
Yes.
legend.
How the hell are you?
What is going
I-
on, Steve?
I'm really good. What's going on? Well, I'm
Yeah.
living
What's new?
living in West Virginia. I'm in. I actually live inches from downtown Point Pleasant, West Virginia.
Ah,
I live on the same road that the Scarberries and Mallets were chased on November 15th of 1966 by something that was dubbed the Mothman, a 6 or 7 foot tall, vaguely humanoid winged creature, about a 10-foot wingspan with red glowing eyes. And I'm also living just a few streets from where the Silver Bridge once stood. And this is the Silver Bridge that
oh my
collapsed on
goodness.
December 15th, 1967. There's a memorial right there. There's a on the flood wall. Unfortunately, I'm living on the correct side of the flood wall.
Oh yeah.
There's a mural of the way
Good.
the bridge used to look when it went over to the Ohio side. There's a mural and a memorial as well. And the 46 names of the people that died are embedded on the sidewalk on one side of the street.
Wow.
So then that's right in downtown Point Pleasant. So and I can actually I work at the Mothman Museum on Saturdays. I'm there to
That's
kind of
great.
answer questions and greet people, and we'll
Mhm.
go out to the statue sometimes. I'll wander out there, and if a family or a group is out there, I can take the whole picture together. I usually say they don't have to send the black sheep of the family out or the kid they don't like to take the picture. So uh,
That's
it's
great.
it's just so much fun talking to and you get people that this has been kind of their mecca. They've made a pilgrimage to be here. They've waited
Mhm.
years to make the trip from
Mhm.
sometimes all over the world. We get people from all over the globe and all over the U.S. So it is just a lot of fun.
Yeah. Me
That
and
sounds
Jen
like
were
an incredible experience.
Yeah.
Well, it is. But I was became aware of the Mothman even before he had a proper name. It was November of 1966 when those two couples were chased down Route 62 out
Mhm.
of what they call the
Mhm.
TNT area. Now, the TNT area, it was nicknamed that forever. It was a place where they made explosives for World War II. It was a huge complex about 9 miles north of Point Pleasant. You can see the old black and white photographs of all the buildings and the structures and so forth. There are some remnants left, but even in the 1960s, when the Mothman started showing up, there wasn't much left, and it's called the McClintock Wildlife Area now. So that was uh, uh, that was quite some time ago, and that's when it all started. And the thing is, that first particular not wasn't the first sighting actually, but the first major sighting when it chased those two couples. It hit the wire services all over the world. So that's why, as a kid in junior high in Michigan, I read about it in the newspapers. So I've been kind of following the Mothman ever since.
Hmm.
Was that
Yeah.
part of your decision to move out of Michigan into West Virginia to be closer
Well,
to the whole center
I,
of that?
I I never expected to move to the place that was kind of my vacation spot. I've been
Mhm.
Mhm.
my first time down here was actually in 1977 after I read John Keel's book, The Mothman Prophecies, and I just really wanted to see the area. So I came down kind of blind one Sunday and ended up at the by happenstance at the Low Hotel, and I had a map of the TNT area. And back then, you could actually just drive around back there. Now, a lot of the areas are
Mhm.
kind of barricaded off, and I had no
Oh.
idea what I was looking for or where I was going. But so I that was my first visit, and I saw the old North Power Plant was still standing, and that's where the Scarberries and the Mallets first saw this thing on the road next to that. And then in 2006, I started coming down to the Mothman festivals. And when I first started coming down, I was that guy that would get the fever. When anything with Mothman stamped in it,
Yeah.
a T-shirt, a book, or whatever, I had to have it. But then
Mhm.
as time went on, I became kind of absorbed, and I started working in front of and behind the scenes, helping to set up in the TNT area. We've got to have a great hayride on Saturday night, where it's
Mhm.
kind of like a Halloween hayride with a guaranteed flyover of the Mothman. And it's a really creepy area in the daytime, very creepy at night. And what they do is they line up three tractors pulling three carts in the at the farm museum, which is in the general TNT area, and two of the carts have bales of hay on it, like classic hayride. They usually give me
Oh, okay.
the old man cart with the nice comfortable seats. So and I'm not complaining either. So and then
Yeah.
we take people into the dreaded TNT area, and the men in black try to turn you away right away. There's three men in black. They have bullhorns. They tell you it's a secure area, and like I tell people, not to worry, they're much more like the Keystone Cops than the real Men in Black. And 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 I spent a few days setting up some stuff like giant spider webs and big furry spiders, and lighting up their eyes, and cobbling together all manner of creatures, including a wolf spider, a big giant spider with a wolf's head, literally, and lighting up
Oh.
his eyes green. So it's you have a few of those things, but for those people that have walked into the Mothman Museum, if you look up in the ceiling right away, you'll see a Mothman suspended there. Well,
Mhm.
John and Tim Frick, who portray the Men in Black by day and fly
Yeah.
the Mothman by night, they take him down. They hide behind the old acid plant out there, and they run him down a wire. They have this ingenious low-tech delivery system with a hand crank. They light up his eyes with battery power, and they blast a sound effect. I can't tell you the source they use for the sound effect because they've never paid royalties, and I don't want them to end up incarcerated or with an ankle bracelet because we need them to
Right.
fly the Mothman. Okay, so and just when you think it's safe, just when you think it's over, there might be a couple guys hidden in the shadows in ghillie suits, ready to jump up on the cart and scare the living daylights out of everybody.
Oh my god. I'm glad you gave
So
me the heads up on that.
So it's the only thing that costs a few bucks. I tell people, look, the hayride is a blast, but you've got to get there early Saturday morning, get in line to buy your ticket because they do limit it. And we
Yeah.
go late into the night with one ride after another. And
Aw.
it's just an absolute blast talking to people from, and sometimes all over the world. A
Mhm.
lot of times I'll say, well, who came the furthest? And one
Mm.
time, a gentleman with a brogue spoke up and said, Belfast.
Ah,
So, yeah,
Wow.
he won that round. And we get just people from all over. And I'll ask people what, yeah, I don't sound like I'm from around here, right? So what's my accent? Where do I come from? It's been really fun to hear some of the guesses. I had
Yeah.
some I had some lady from Ohio tell me, you're from Michigan because you have an accent. And I told her, I said, lady, I don't have an accent.
everyone else does.
Yeah, that's right. That's
Right.
right. In the Midwest, we don't have accents, right?
Yeah.
No, we don't. So what's it like living there, like not during the the festival season? Is it quiet? Is there anything going on?
Well, they always have something going on. They've had some Christmas stuff going on and Halloween. They're very good to have things for the kids, and
Mhm.
kids dress up in their costumes or whatever. They have uh, a place where you can drive through and see all the lights, and they have a Mothman all lit up, and there's all kinds of history here. I mean, if you if you go through the flood wall opposite the uh, Mothman statue and make a left. Now, there's all kinds of murals that are of battle scenes because of the Revolutionary War and so forth. But there are other sculptures by Bob Roach. Bob Roach is the man that created the Mothman statue. He's no longer with us, but he also created other sculptures, stainless steel sculptures, figures out of history like Chief Cornstalk. If you go a little bit further down the river, you'll hit Way Park, which means where the rivers meet, and they literally do, the Kanawha and the Ohio. And Chief Cornstalk is buried there. And many
Mm.
claim that's the first battle of the Revolutionary War. There are others to dispute that, but hey, they're not West by God Virginians, so they can,
Have you gotten anybody feeling like you're an outsider because you're from Michigan living in West Virginia, or is that kind of like a
oh, no.
cool?
People are just very friendly here, and they, I had a plumber was over here, and he did say it does sound like you're not from around here. so so
Aw.
I am a West Virginian. It just says so on my driver's license, but I don't think I have the accent quite yet.
Not yet. You're working on it.
Yeah, not yet. So, has there been any recent activity surrounding Mothman? Has anybody had any claims, maybe in the last 5 to 10 years, of seeing
Uh,
anything?
Yeah, I don't have the specifics now. Small Town Monsters has done a couple of great, they do great documentaries, and they
Mm-hmm.
did one several years ago called The Mothman of Point Pleasant, and in 2020 they did the sequel called The Mothman Legacy. There are a few people on there. Some are original witnesses that were not in the Mothman prophecies, but some are more
Oh
recent.
wow.
People have seen something. I'm not absolutely sure we're talking about exactly the same thing when you get into
Mm-hmm.
the realm of the unexplained and the paranormal, and especially if there's no pretending here. I'm a Keelian. I'm a follower of John
Mhm.
Keel, and John Keel thought that many of these things may emanate from the same source, but perhaps they manifest or appear differently. He thought that it may not be that important to categorize what specifically they looked like, or the so-called spacecraft, whether it had a dome or portals or whatever. He wanted to understand the cosmic mechanism behind these things. So I'm always, there's been a lot of winged creatures or apparitions reported over the decades. There was the Houston Batman that almost looked like somebody dressed up in a suit or something. There was the Wisconsin Man Bat. Some maybe a decade ago, Linda Godfrey reported on it. A man and his son were driving, and this big, ugly bat-like thing swooped by and kind of hit their windshield and took off. and they became very ill afterwards. This thing didn't look at all like the Mothman.
Hmm.
So I'm always I'm not, it seemed like the Mothman, whatever it was, and it was kind of a paradox. I'll get into that, but I don't think these things. Again, they may come from the same ultimate source somehow, but just manifest differently, like uh, creatures from the id, so to speak, or the
Hmm.
uh,
Mhm.
the phantom menagerie. But the thing about the Mothman was while John Keel spoke to a little over 100 people that year. He came down. He was a journalist from New York City. Had been investigating UFOs and the unexplained. By the way, he did not want to be called a ufologist. He considered
Really?
himself a Fortean, i.e., Charles Fort.
Hmm.
So,
Mhm.
but he had come down 5 times during that year, between roughly December 66 and December 67, and talked to, again, a little over 100 people. The descriptions of whatever this was were generally the same. Sometimes people said they saw something more like just a large bird. I think there were a couple of National Guardsmen that said they saw like some kind of a large, ugly bird in the tree, something very unusual. Tom Urey saw something kind of like a thunderbird, but others like Linda Scarberry, Faye DeWitt, uh, um, and others saw the sort of the classic Mothman. Again, 6, 7 foot tall, red glowing eyes, 10-foot wingspan. The thing is, the behavior and the aftermath in some of these was very odd. It didn't always flap its wings when it took off. Connie Carpenter was one of the early witnesses of this thing. She was driving past the Mason County golf course. She saw it standing there, red glowing eyes that really freaked her out. It took off straight like a helicopter without flapping its wings. It flew over her car. Now, John Keel, when he arrived on the scene, he went to the McDaniels house. He was invited there, and they invited over several of the very recent original witnesses that had seen this thing, including the Scarberries and the Mallets that were chased in their car down Route 62. Um, and he saw Connie Carpenter was there. She had eye burn or conjunctivitis, and that's
Hmm.
something that kind of shocked him because normally will happen if people have a close proximity of a UFO sighting or a strange light. But apparently, it happens sometimes with cryptids. Now, Keel also found, he said, he was finding that people that had a close proximity cryptid experience, um, or a close encounter with a UFO or strange light, would often suffer from the same types of ailments like conjunctivitis sometimes, muscle ache, thirst, suggesting that perhaps maybe these things are coming from the same source and they're not terribly separate. But also, besides it not always flapping its wings and taking off straight like a helicopter, a lot of people that saw this. Now, Keel found this, and there was a Swedish researcher named Franzen that followed him in a year or two later, and Keel gave him an introduction because they were sort of colleagues from across from Sweden to the U.S. He'd helped him Keel find information on the so-called ghost flyers, and they both found that many people that had an experience with the Mothman uh, had an outbreak of poltergeist phenomena when they got
Hmm.
home. Now, so how do we, and sometimes people that have close proximity of a UFO would also have that experience. Um, there was a town official who wasn't named, and later on it came out that he was a banker. He heard something out on his front lawn. He came out on his porch and he saw this creature standing there. Well, he went into a trance. He was there for 10 or 20 minutes, and then he came out of it and it flew away. I talked recently to Linda Sigmund. She has only in recent years come out with her sighting. Very credible lady. She was, I'm trying to think, 16, was it? In 1966. It was, no, it was 1967, April. and she and her boyfriend were about 12 miles north of Point Pleasant. They were sitting on the trunk of the car, just kind of looking at the night sky. They saw this. It's kind of a long story, but they saw this kind of an orb or light, and then they took off. They saw another light, and he wanted to get out of there, but Linda, was looking outside the window, and she saw essentially the Mothman flying along or near this ball of light. And at some point, she also had missing time. So some people had missing time experiences in conjunction with this, whatever it was. A few people said that they saw it in conjunction with some kind of a strange light or a UFO or whatever. So I don't know what to make of that. I'm not one that tends to think
Mhm.
that this is extraterrestrial. Like John Keel, I suspect that some of these things are simply a natural condition of the planet, things we just don't understand. So you had this. Oh, and another thing. There was a couple. They were missionaries, and one night, now this stuff had just started. They hadn't seen anything in the newspapers. The next day, they were slated to go off to a faraway country to be missionaries for several years. And this thing, the Mothman, whatever it was, manifested in their bedroom. Exactly the same description, same height, red glowing eyes, and so forth. Now, in their context, they thought it was something demonic.
Mhm.
And the next day, they prayed about it, they left. Years later, they came back and they looked at the old newspapers and they thought, my God, that's what we saw in our bedroom. So I don't know how we, put all these things together to figure out what the Mothman was. It's almost like the Mothman was some kind of a elemental. Just don't ask me
Mm-hmm.
what the heck an elemental is, because I don't have an answer.
Yeah.
But it's so weird because everything you're describing happens, like the coincidences between the poltergeist activity and the UFO activity, the blue orb activity, Bigfoot, all that, it all comes together. And by you mentioning this, kind of reconfirms that, you
Yeah.
Yeah,
know?
it does. It does.
Wow.
Again, echoing John Keel, Jacques Vallée, Patrick Harper, and so many other researchers, it does seem like that no matter what we do, these things are all have some kind of a connection, some kind of an underlying connection.
And I've never heard until now you mentioned about those two people. It manifests itself in a room. So it didn't come into the room, it just manifests
Right.
itself there.
I
So it makes you
talked.
wonder, is it
Coming through a
interdimensional?
portal?
I don't know. Keel, in an earlier book from the Mothman prophecies, it was originally called "Strange Creatures from Time and Space." It had that one of those great Frank Frazetta paintings on the cover. Later on, it's been retitled as "The Complete Guide to Mysterious Beings." But in that book, he started talking about window areas,
Mhm.
essentially portals or whatever. He was simply trying to come to grips uh, with how is it that these things, these different cryptids, Bigfoot and so forth, and even UFOs seem to show up. In some cases, Bigfoot or Mothman scare the living daylights out of people, and then they kind of fade away. They're even
Yeah.
seen on the edges of a lot of very populated areas sometimes, and sometimes even in populated areas. So, um, and that was that was kind of it was kind of bringing people slowly into that idea. And then at the same time, pretty much, he wrote Operation Trojan Horse. I guess both books came out in 1970. And Trojan Horse didn't sell very well at first, and people didn't want to hear it, because that's where he starts to connect the dots. Cryptids, poltergeist phenomena, psychic phenomena, UFOs, and going back through history and showing how all these things seem to have some kind of connection. And he
Mhm.
was, very strong on the idea that these things were perhaps in some cases temporal manifestations. They were certainly physical, to a degree, or for a while.
Mhm.
They leave footprints, hair
Yeah.
samples, and so forth. Some of these creatures would attack livestock, etc., and then they would sort of just kind of melt away, you know. So yeah, he was very forward thinking, and boy, at the time, and even at the time, I didn't want to hear it.
Mhm.
I was a very happy ET guy. You know, they're coming from outer space and landing and checking us out, and once in a while giving us a ride, or maybe one of those again, one of those unscheduled medical examinations that became so popular. Yeah, yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah, I don't like the scheduled ones or the unscheduled ones as
Yeah.
far as that goes.
Right?
Yeah, it
So,
just
But
it makes you think that, we know that our eyes can only see a certain wavelength and everything. It's like it kind of makes you think, are these things always around us, but we just can't see them until they get into some kind of spectrum?
well, it's interesting you mentioned that because Keel, I think he used it as kind of a literary device. He talked about the super spectrum, that area that is kind of beyond the normal visible light range and so forth.
Mhm.
But he talked a lot about uh, um, paranormal mimicry, the reflective factor, because if you look throughout history, it's sort of like the UFO problem has shifted or manifested differently, or people have reported it differently. I mean, if you go way, way back, you can talk about people talk about the moving lights. They were fairy lights.
Mhm.
Other countries looked at them as lights that belonged to to sort of the indigenous little people or the elementals or whatever. And actually, in some time periods, they actually thought that witches were flying around on their brooms, and the lights were their lanterns.
Mhm.
And but then, as over time, you had those majestic airships that showed up in the late 1800s, those big dirigible like things, impossible ships that would land occasionally. And as time went on, you had the ghost flyers, the mysterious planes that were being seen way up in northern Sweden. And they were like giant planes with something like 8 propellers on them. Where could they have come from? Where would the base have been? And they were shining these big uh, 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 spotlights down in little towns in northern Sweden. They were seen all over Norway, Sweden, and Finland. And then there was it kind of morphed into the ghost rockets, and then
Mhm.
the so-called Foo Fighters of World
Yeah.
War II. They were like a lot of them were just kind of small lights that would pace the planes or form off the wings or whatever. And both sides,
Mhm.
the Allies and the Axis, thought the other guys had some kind of a secret weapon. And then we get into more modern day. We get into more of the era of science fiction. These things take on a shape like, look at the Kelly Hopkinsville goblins in Kentucky.
Mhm.
Look
Yeah.
at the Cisco Grove aliens, and then in more recent times, the Greys. So it's like, are these things are they really physically different groups of aliens? Or they might be, or are we? I think Keel suggested that perhaps in some ways, again, that we might be actually co-creating some of these things. He talked about transmogrifications of energy, that whatever this source was, extra dimensional or whatever, this intelligence or this energy that would kind of intermix with our general collective consciousness, our thoughts or expectations, and kind of change over time. Who was it? Ted Phillips. Ted Phillips, another great, no longer with us. He was a friend and colleague of Dr. J. Allen Hynek, and he literally investigated thousands of trace landing cases. In other words, close encounters of the second kind, cases where they would leave burn marks, radiation, a tripod marks, or whatever, and effects on people, uh, uh, effects on the bushes or the trees around there. And at one point, now he had never seen a UFO, but he was introduced to a place he dubbed Marley Woods, and it's a place in southeastern Missouri. I think it's actually some of the towns in the area were outed by a guy, but he was trying to keep it secret. But the thing is, it's the first time he was able to see any kind of a light phenomena or UFO phenomena for himself. And the thing was that most of this was like balls of light that would separate, come together. They weren't like classic metallic flying saucers, so to speak. But they also had
Mhm.
all kinds of they were saying things like large dogs, dog-like creatures with long white hair. They were having missing time. There was all kinds of things going on there. But his point was it seemed like that, well, you could still see the giant black triangles. You could still see kind of a classic UFO or flying saucer. A lot of it seemed to be changing more to light phenomena. And so, you wonder that's something to really pay attention to, that these trends, these things seem to change over time. And why is that? Is it simply coming from the source? Is it something that is part of us?
And it's like the different flaps. You say how they change over time because they used to say the airships. So they saw the big airships, then they saw planes, and now we're seeing triangles and all that. Do you think that, or I should say it a different way, do you believe that it's because of our times and we understand what we see? Or do you think that the extraterrestrials are cloaking or whatever themselves to look like what the people of that era would recognize? Because, if back when the um, Zeppelins and the airships were flying over, if someone saw a flying triangle, they wouldn't understand it. But we would, in our time, we understand it because we have the flying wings and that. So, what's your thoughts on that? Do you think that they either change or is it just how they describe it?
Well, it it could be that they are simply cloaking. I mean, it's not. It's almost impossible to say. I suspect that some of it is reflective. And
Mhm,
although I think there are certainly certain aspects of this phenomenon, I suspect that there are flesh and blood unknown animals. I suspect that there are some real nuts and bolts craft from
mhm.
elsewhere, extra dimensional or whatever. But there is this other aspect, this reflective factor, this Keelian idea that I think holds a lot of water.
Yeah.
So so I've come to kind of believe both. I mean, I've been the pendulum has swung both ways for me. There was a time when I was strictly ET, nuts and bolts.
Mhm.
Another time when I thought, oh no, none of it's real. If they're all psychic projections or whatever, but that doesn't work either. So, you know,
Yeah.
it's just it's a real paradox,
Mhm.
but it's interesting, if you look at the work of Stan Gordon, his book Silent Invasion. He talks about the bizarre series of Bigfoot-like encounters in '73 and '74 in southwestern Pennsylvania, and green glowing eyes, is shot point blank with a shotgun, disappearing in a flash of light, all
Mhm.
kinds of bizarre. I mean, the reports in there are just crazy, but you have this strange combination of strange lights, strange craft, or whatever they are, and some kind of bizarre creature on the ground. Well, if you go back to 1897 in Ohio, there was a series of airship sightings, possibly the same one. It was making kind of a clockwise circuit around Ohio, even lapsing into Sistersville, West Virginia. And at the same time, this is between mid-April and mid-May. At the same time on the ground, people are seeing these large black panther-like creatures, large black cats uh, around Chillicothe and other areas. There was this one cat people were seeing. It had kind of an overlarge head, kind of short legs, very, very odd looking. It was attacking dogs and so forth. They uh, uh, they shot at it, but they never hit it. They never captured it. They never killed it. And also at the same time, in Adams County, home of the Serpent Mound, they were seeing something they called a wild man. Now, today we would say Bigfoot. And they were saying this, so they were seeing these bizarre creatures on the ground at the same time these things are going on in the sky. Let me give you another example. Uh, Uh, we're all familiar with Elkhorn, Wisconsin. Linda Godfrey, with her books, the starting with the Beast of Bray
Mhm.
Road, put that on the map, and she's the one that kind of brought the dog man to the forefront in this country. I was just recently talking to Paul Sinclair from Yorkshire, and he has been getting reports of what they call the Flixton werewolf over there, essentially the same thing. But these reports go back for centuries, you know. So, but Linda Godfrey, when she started reporting these things, uh, eventually she met up with a man named Lee Hampel. He has a farm just a stone's throw from Bray Road, where these things have been going on. He is he's retired. He's producing hay on his farm. He was a mathematician, which taught school for years, and he has degrees in chemistry. He's a scientist. So when people told him, he said, they'd say, you know, there's a werewolf that lives in those woods back there. He'd look at him like, what the hell are you talking about? And then
Yeah.
he saw it. Not only did he see it, he had missing time. He's had missing time a couple times. He has seen this thing more than once. He has chronicled the footprints. He has, over the last 10 years, he has set up trap cameras. He has hundreds, thousands of photographs of bizarre things going on that farm. And some of it appears to be some kind of technology, stuff in the sky, sometimes like a classic UFO. And these things are all time stamped. So these things will like whip around the tree in a few seconds and disappear. He has chronicled the footprints of this thing, 5 toes, not supposed to exist, and a
Mhm.
pad and a heel. And you can see the footprints in these one series of photographs start in the snow in the middle of nowhere,
Oh.
split into two creatures, more or less, and then end nowhere. The thing is that he you can't, it's very hard to get a picture of these things. You'll get like a part of one or whatever, but there's some kind of intelligence or force preventing him from getting clear picture of these things. I mean, they're clearly leaving physical evidence. They eat roadkill, they eat bait, they act like animals, but they're also some kind of bizarre technology. So again, you have this other strange situation where there seems to be some kind of an intelligence or technology, and these photographs are just bizarre. He will have people
Was
over when what's that?
was he the one that was leaving deer out? Like
Yes.
deer roadkill? Okay, yeah, I think I read something about that.
Well, I've seen
And
the
then it would come
photographs.
in the yeah.
Yes, on his road, there's been several deer killed with car accidents. So he'll
Mhm,
pull them onto his farm. He'll aim a camera on it, and at night, at some point, you'll see a mist show up, and you'll watch
Mhm.
the timestamp, and then the time goes on, and the carcass is gone. There's no drag marks. There's no footprints. This has happened at least a dozen times, and so it's just inexplicable. The Bucks County guys, the Eric Mintel Investigates, they were out there a couple of years ago, and they did a night investigation, and that you can see their documentary on their website. Eric Mintel Investigates. Well, they were out there, and he was on with Ellen and Dominic. Dominic's the sensitive. The first thing that they saw a light moving in the sky. They thought was a satellite. Then it zips across the sky, not a satellite, not a plane,
Mhm.
and then y- when you listen to this, they start to hear this howling, and this howling goes on is on one side and then on the other, like as there's a response. Now, I've always said I wouldn't know a any kind of an animal howl from I don't know, from a xylophone. So I'm not any
mhm.
kind of an expert, but boy, it was creepy. And they said they saw eyes shine about 6 feet off the ground. And again, Dominic, who's the sensitive, I said, Dominic, what were you feeling like out there? And you know how when people have these dogman encounters, there's kind of a feeling of negativity, of evil or whatever, kind of
Mhm.
consistent.
Yeah.
Well, Dominic said, I felt like I was underwater in a shark tank holding the bait.
Oh.
And they all
Yeah.
got freaked out. And Eric said, I normally don't get unnerved at this stuff, but then a mist started to form. Now, uh, mists have formed on this area before. There's a photograph of Lee Hampel in the daytime, surrounded by a mist taken by one of the trap cameras. He did not see the mist when he was there in the daylight. So it's, these things are showing up on camera that aren't visible with the naked eye. So they actually decided to leave, and they did go back and do another investigation at a later date. But and the irony is the next week they were actually in the Pine Barrens with a couple of seasoned Bigfoot researchers. They were just like
Okay.
miles into the middle of nowhere in the dark. They were hearing whoops and knocking and that kind of thing. And Dominic said it was almost like a day on the beach. He didn't feel any negativity, any fear at all. It was a complete contrast to the night he was on Lee Hample's farm
Yeah.
in the presence of perhaps some unknown creature.
Yeah.
Mhm. Have you ever put any trail cams, or has anybody put any trail cams out in and around Point Pleasant to see if they could capture anything?
I imagine they have. I never have.
Mhm.
The only time I interacted with a trap cam was a few years ago. Uh, a couple of my nephews were very much into finding Bigfoot. And so
Okay.
his dad had put up a trap camera on the grandfather's property, and we knew where it was. So we got me dressed up in a Bigfoot costume, and I couldn't tell if I was triggering this thing or not. So I'm walking back and forth in this like growth or whatever, trying
Mhm.
the not to
Yeah.
get the feet to pull off. And so later on that day, they got the trap camera and they just said, "Well, Luke, let's take a look at this. Let's see if we got anything." So they're going through the images, and you see some wildlife now and then. Then all of a sudden, there
Yeah.
I am in all my glory with my arms up in the air. And he says, "Dad, Bigfoot."
That's cute. Oh my
So
gosh.
I'm afraid that yeah, I'm afraid the photographs weren't probably terribly convincing. So if they ever show up on the internet, I don't think
Yeah.
anybody's going to be swayed by them.
Oh, I don't know.
You never know.
I make
People claim to
Bigfoot
see.
cutouts, and I've seen so many pictures of Bigfoot cutouts, and they say this is real, or
Uh,
the one I saw, it said downtown Toledo sighting, and it's the side of a river with all these trees and all. I'm like, no, that's not it. But yeah, so you never know. Someday Steve will be world famous as the Bigfoot man in the woods.
or I'll get shot when I'm
Yeah.
wearing a costume.
Let's hope not.
I
Let's hope.
want to go
Knock on
back.
wood.
I want to go back to Mothman for a few minutes.
Sure.
Do we know how fast they fly?
Well,
Has there been?
it seemed to keep pace with the car. They said they got close to speeds of 100 miles an hour. Now, with
Okay.
that road there, they couldn't maintain that speed or anything close to that for very long.
Hmm.
But it seemed to not it wasn't going ahead of the car, but they when if they were to look outside the window, they could see it, but they couldn't see it in front of them.
Okay.
So, and the thing is, when they first saw this, they were driving by the dirt road that was next to the old North Power Plant, which was a ruin by the 1960s. And Linda Scarberry saw what she thought was a man in the road, and she said, "What's that man doing standing there?" Well, then that man spread his wings,
Mm.
and they could see the red eyes, and that's when it kind of shuffled off toward the old North Power Plant and seemed to go inside. Well, then they didn't wait along very long, and then they took off, and they go down what is now called the uh, Farm Road, the Farm Museum Road,
Okay.
and hit the main drag 62, make a left, and right there was a road sign, and they said they saw it standing there, so they weren't absolutely sure it was the same creature
Okay.
or if it was another one. Some people think there were several of them,
Mhm.
and who knows? But and then they took off, and then it followed their car in.
Okay. Yeah, because that's what I was getting at, is because we have multiple sightings, and I was just wondering if it might have been a pack, or if it was an individual one that just could move so fast that people saw it all over the place.
Yeah, if it's something I don't know something more like an elemental or paranormal or whatever, it doesn't flap its wings. A
Hmm.
speed may not mean anything. The
Yeah.
way it manifests.
Mhm. Yeah, it could just manifest in a completely different area to the but you mentioned about the Wisconsin Batman. Now, I know it's
Yeah,
not as close. It's a few miles away, but there was a lot of sightings, and I don't know if these are credible or not, but there was a lot of sightings in Chicago
right.
recently of the Mothman, and I was wondering if that might have been something the same or, you know.
Well, I was informed some time ago by a couple different sources from MUFON that
Mhm.
some of the initial sightings that go back, what, about 10 years now, several of them were coming from the same IP address,
Oh,
suggesting that somebody was. And there's a great researcher named Allison Jornlin. She went and did a lot of footwork in that area a few years
mhm,
ago, and she tracked down a lot of these alleged sightings. Now a lot of these some of these sightings, people weren't really coming forward; they were anonymous. But she would go to the location and investigate. And if somebody's making up something, sometimes they don't get the location and everything quite right. So she was finding several. She found some that she thought were credible, but she found several that she thought were problematic.
okay.
So, and there were even there was a couple people that spoke up that were critical of this, and then very shortly afterwards, a in quotes Mothman sighting showed up in the town they were living in. And
Mm,
I kind of think maybe that was fabricated to say, hey, here you are in this town, and there's a Mothman sighting, and you missed it.
yeah,
I don't know. I'm a little bit cynical about the Chicago Mothman sightings. I could be wrong, but
mhm,
some people swear by it and think it's legitimate. But I'm just not. There may be many credible experiences coming out of there, but I'm just kind of. I'm just very skeptical, and I take them a lot of them with a grain of salt.
yeah. Because we know it lives in Point Pleasant down there
Yeah,
in West
Right.
Virginia.
that's right. Well, I think there's one researcher that firmly believes that Mothman has migrated to the Chicago area. But I would say the one fallacy about that is there was with the Mothman there was quite a high strangeness factor. There was you had all kinds of bizarre things going on at the same time. UFO reports, Men in Black,
Mhm,
animal mutilations, poltergeist phenomena. I've not heard any of that reported with the Chicago Mothman sightings. There's simply sightings of some kind of a creature.
yeah,
There was one sighting 3 years earlier, almost 3 years to the day, that the Scarberries and the Mallets were chased down Route 62 in Kent, England, 1966, November, as some kids were coming back from a dance, and they saw this light, this globe of light, come down behind a grove of trees, and then I think the light manifested again, and then they saw this creature. Well, this creature was identical to the Mothman, the way it kind of shuffled along, the way it seemed not to have a head per se. The only
mhm,
thing that was different was they did not see glowing eyes. They did not see eyes. But that was kind of remarkable that that's the one really close sighting that kind of paralleled or was almost identical to what people were reporting in Point Pleasant 3 years later.
hmm,
And it's
Has there
interesting
been,
because go ahead.
I'm sorry, we hear a lot of the sightings here in the United States, and now you're mentioning England, but is there any other countries that have had these type of anomalies or stories?
Well, there was the Owl Man in Cornwall, I think in the 80s, something vaguely similar to the Mothman. There were several young girls that saw it over a short period of time in a cemetery. Um, so there
Oh,
and then there was something, boy, in Central America, the locals called them the Icals, Ikals. They were like these little beings that seemed like they were flying around with almost some kind of a jetpack, bothering people. Just yeah,
right.
I can't remember all the details, but they're and then John Keel. There's a great chapter in this book called oh, the flutter of black wings, maybe. Um, but he goes through the history of a lot of these. Uh, sightings of there was supposedly a man seen over Coney Island in the early 1900s. It looked like he was in some kind of contraption of flying over, with
Could have
wings
been.
and so forth. And it chronicles several thunderbirds and so forth. There was one that really cracked me up, where this guy, this in quotes old guy, had seen this thing twice in 1 week. This giant bird, and he said, "That's just too much tomfoolery for a man of 50 to take." A man of 50, good lord.
Yeah.
Shoot, I bypassed that. Um, I know there was a lot of UFO activity up towards like Erie, Pennsylvania. Um, and I think that was in 1967, was that?
I think
So
it
I'm
was.
wondering if maybe that was related to the
It may
Mothman
well it
sightings.
it may well have been. There were a lot of, flaps that, covered over a certain area. In Michigan, several months before the Mothman showed up, in March, we had those, the so-called what I call the swamp gas sightings. That's when,
Mm.
Dr. Hynek was dispatched from Project Blue Book. He was still had the apron strings tied to Blue Book, and they wanted him to kinda diffuse the situation, even though he had begun to believe that there was really something to this. And there were a lot of credible reports from police officers and so forth. And there was a landing that people witnessed on the Frank Manor Farm in Dexter, Ann Arbor, Hillsdale. The people were seeing, credible people were seeing something. And he made that fateful pronouncement on a live uh, news conference where he was suggesting that some of the sightings in Hillsdale might possibly be swamp gas, and he was really stretching because it would have been the wrong time of year for
Mhm.
those kinds of
Mm.
gases to form. And of course, that's all the press needed. That was the solution to the UFO mystery, and the jokes that have reverberated for decades. I saw him 10 years later in Ann Arbor at the 1976 MUFON Symposium. He was there with Ray Stanford and Jerome Clark and several others. And the name of his talk was Swamp Gas Plus 10 and Counting. And so he was it was very humorous, but it was very serious. By that time, he had long left the Project Blue Book. He had started the Center for UFO Studies in Evanston, Illinois. And he had became, John Keel said, he became one of the good guys, and started wearing a white hat. And so it was, he actually showed some hilarious political cartoons at the time. And one of the classic ones was you see the little green men with their blasters, and they've just landed in their flying saucer, and they stop the man on the sidewalk, and the caption is, "Take us to the man that called us swamp gas."
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, it's like
But that's interesting because, like the area we live in used to be the Great Black
mhm.
Swamp. And that was one of the reports was
Ah,
these, the Native Americans wouldn't go in there. It was full of gas and other, very dangerous things. So it's interesting, with the whole triangle of Ohio, Michigan, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, this area
Mhm.
is such a hotbed for all
Yeah,
these different types of activities.
the Native Americans would say that they would see the lights, and I forget exactly what they called them, but the lights in the swamp.
right. Well, Keel wasn't too sure that the flap idea was legitimate. He thought that perhaps
Mhm.
sometimes it was simply uh, the focus of attention. These things are going on all the time, but certainly the mainstream press, the national press, very seldom picks up these things. Once in a while they do, but for years I subscribed to it. Was a great service they don't have anymore. It was called the UFO News Clipping Service, started in the 60s, and I took it over different times over a period of decades. And what they would do is for like $5 a month, you would get they would have their own news clipping service. They would call together all these UFO reports from all over the US. They had a foreign section, and then they would have a Forteana section with cryptids and so forth. And so what you found was that these things were happening everywhere all the time. It's just that they would seldom get beyond the local newspaper. Once in a while you'd get the Phoenix Lights or the Stevensville UFO or the O'Hare Airport one. But these things were going kind of under the national radar all the time. So and that was just a fascinating resource, but
Mhm.
unfortunately that's not available anymore.
Ah, that's a shame. Of course,
Yeah, that
could you
is.
imagine how full it'd be now? You
Well, you
know?
could you could you could spend hundreds of dollars a month
Yeah.
on the various clipping services, and they would get it for you. But you would
Mhm.
really have to be independently wealthy. Like you guys are the
Oh, yeah.
Toledo. Yeah, yeah, the Toledo upper crust.
More like
I
the
burnt
burnt
that crust.
toast.
Yeah.
Did
And we
you,
take a life.
Steve, when you lived in Michigan, did you ever investigate the Paulding lights?
No, I heard I just heard different uh, uh, opinions on it. Who was it? Patrick Burns, wasn't he the one that did a show called Haunting Evidence? And he would have psychics on revisiting cold cases and so forth. Well, he claimed that he went up there and he was certain that it was uh, uh, traffic lights and so forth. But
Mhm.
then I saw another show once where they actually shut down the road temporarily that they thought was responsible for it, and the Paulding light is still there. So I never went
Oh,
up there
so
to see
interesting.
it. I think the jury's still out. I don't. I guess I'd like to think it's something uh, even supernatural, even though I don't
Yeah.
use that word very much.
Yeah,
But
maybe.
I don't. I'm not convinced it is natural. I think that the jury's still out on that.
Hmm. I'm gonna have to go.
Um,
Is
have
that
you
still going
ever?
on? Oh, Jen, do you know if that's still going on or?
I believe it
Yeah, I
is.
mean there were still reports in 2023 of
Oh,
people going and checking it out. So we should go there
road
sometime.
trip.
Yeah. So Steve, has there ever or have you ever encountered with your work at the Mothman Museum psychics or mediums or anybody with those type of abilities coming to um see what they sense or feel in and around the Mothman in Point Pleasant?
I talked briefly to a lady. Actually, she was passing by my house and saw one of my Mothman signs on the door that says, yeah, I'm afraid it says Mothman sighting zone, enter at your own risk. I know. Uh, but I didn't talk to her for very long, but she claimed that she was a sensitive and she might be able to sense something. But I haven't, no, I would always be interested in people that pick up things like that and see what they think. But I get stories sometimes by people. I get it's so cool because uh, I had this one couple that they were just the guy was so happy to be there, and we were talking. We got in these great conversations as like we do here, and he must have shaken my
Yeah.
hand 5 times. He was just so happy.
Aw.
And there was another young man that he was standing there in the front part is where you can buy books, T-shirts, and souvenirs and good stuff. And then the back part is the museum part. And and he was he was standing there with his mouth open. He was just like stunned. He was like finally there. And we
Oh,
have oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say you're a walking encyclopedia of this phenomena.
Well, listen, Jen, I'm so old. I taught
Oh,
Methuselah
hush.
how to ride a bicycle without training wheels.
You hush.
I have a very important question that I
Oh.
was gonna save till the end, but I might as well say it now. You mentioned about this statue that's just outside the museum.
Yes.
Um, who is the model for the backside of that? Because
Well,
I see a lot of people take pictures of that.
I I'd been telling people that I
Oh.
was. So far, there's been a couple ladies that said that they said they believed it, but they were just kind of cut me a merce. That's all. They weren't they weren't serious. But listen, it is so much fun. I've told this before on different shows, but when a lot of people don't know what's behind the Mothman statue. And
Uh-huh.
they'll say, and that's funny when the little kids see it, they just don't hold back. They say, I
Yeah.
see Mothman's butt. And I'll say, and I'll tell them, look, we're very dignified here in West Virginia. We call it the shiny hiney. And Ashley Walmsley Morrison, who is the daughter of Jeff Walmsley, the curator of the Mothman Museum, the man that created this great museum, and he
Mhm.
has two other stores down there too: the Point Pleasant Trading Company and Bunker. Oh, was it 804? What the heck is it? It's like a vinyl shop. It's really cool.
Huh.
And also he's the co-founder of the Mothman Festival. But she created a shirt that says the Shiny Hiney Club, and I've got several of them. Now, so
That's so cool.
when we go up there and I offer to take their picture, and I show them
Mhm.
I got a name tag that, so I'm legitimate. I'm not some derelict that just drifted in there, you know. So I get their picture and I get a close up and everything, and then standing in front of the statue, if you look up to your left to the second story, they've got a mannequin dressed like the Man in Black with a fedora, black suit, and dark
Mhm.
sunglasses. It's really cool. It's especially cool at night because they leave the light on and it looks really
Okay.
creepy. It really does take people aback sometimes. So
Uh-huh.
I show them that, and then I say, now look, to get the full Mothman experience, to experience the full Monty, we have to walk around behind the statue and take a look. And then I introduce them to the shiny hiney, and they and the expressions are, especially with the kids. But there was one couple, the young lady, she took one look, she just doubled over with laughter. Then she straightened up and looked again, and she just doubled over again. The best reaction I have ever seen. And people people will slap it. They will
Mhm.
slide their charge card through it, and I tell them, "You better check your you better check your bill when you get home." They
Yeah.
will stick they will stick quarters back there, and they do other things I cannot say,
Yeah.
online or in
Oh.
person, or I would be arrested. Okay.
Mhm.
Now and then after all that, I say, "Look up there at the Man in Black. You see that little black dot off to the side? That's our 24/7 moth cam." That means right now, people all over the world on the
Mhm.
internet just saw you slap Mothman's caboose.
Gotta be
That's
careful.
great.
And
Cameras are everywhere.
and they just love it. They just eat it up. I
Uh-huh.
I even I even get a donation once in a while, a little gratuity, and it just blows me away. So very
Yeah,
very
that's
happy for that.
cool.
I don't do it for that, but it's just it's just so much fun. And
Yeah.
again, you don't I introduce myself to people and I make myself available. Some people want to talk and have questions, and others, you sense if somebody wants you to, go take a flying leap and hit the county line. So
Yeah.
it's not that bad. But we also have, I always like to say, we have 5 documentaries running all at the same time. And Jeff has, for one of them, he's created like a separate viewing room. And that documentary he shows there is the one that came out about the same time that the movie did. And they had like clips from the movie and used the music from the movie. But there's two small town monsters documentaries running. There's one right up front where you pay for the merchandise or pay to go in to the museum part. And I tell people, if you watch very carefully toward the end, when you see Tom Urey's image there, as the camera closes in, you will see the back of my head for about 2.5 seconds. Now
You're famous.
well,
You're
you could tell
famous.
I was going to be a star because if you go all the way to the back to the Mothman Legacy, you will see
Yeah.
my handsome countenance in there several times as a talking head, along with some other pretty good people as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, when you have the people that come into the museum, is it a lot of people that are just curious, or is this something that people are gravitated to because they've done research and they're, really interested in it?
Good question. I often ask people, was this a planned destination, or were you just stopping
Mm.
by? Because there are signs out on the various roads and so forth. And sometimes people are
Yeah.
visiting somewhere and they realize, oh my God, we're right near Point Pleasant, home of the
Mhm.
Mothman.
Hmm.
Let's go. Uh,
Yeah.
many people, that's their destination. They've made it a day trip or longer, and come from way out of state to be there. So
Yeah.
and a lot of people have a lot of young kids have been sometimes it's mostly due to YouTube videos and so forth. I do find people that have read the book, and I immediately fall in love with them if they're a lady, if they've actually read the book, and it's just really, some people know Keel very well. Many people were introduced to this from the film, and it's bizarre that the film with Richard Gere and Laura Linney is like 20 years old now.
Mhm.
A little over 20
Wow,
years old.
that's crazy.
But
Yeah.
it's
Have you
also
ever
good.
had any celebrities show up?
Yes.
Anybody quote unquote celebrities
Well, you know what? There's been some there. Ashley
besides
usually.
yourself?
Well, yeah, yeah. Ashley usually posts them, but sometimes there are
Mhm.
people I don't know who they are. But I'm trying to think. There was a while ago, Bobcat
Mhm.
Goldthwait, the guy that
Mhm.
does the
Mhm.
voices.
Yeah.
I didn't see
Uh-huh.
him, but he was there. Now Jeff didn't know who he was at first, so somebody told him, and he
Uh-huh.
runs out and he gets them and brings them back, and they got their picture by the Mothman statue. I'm
Oh,
trying to
that's
think.
cool.
Oh, I think the picker guy from Iowa, is it? What?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Mike.
Yeah, yeah. See,
Mike
my
something.
my my I'm pretty good in some areas of pop culture, and other areas I just
Yeah.
absolutely stink. So, but yeah, there are. Oh, and of course, the Mountain Monster guys. Wild Bill's got his picture
Oh
in there.
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
in fact, I was at Tudor's Biscuit World across the river in Gallipolis one time, and I'm sitting there, and I get this on the shoulder like that, and I look up, and it's Wild Bill. I'd seen him several times before at various venues, so he took me out
Yeah.
to his car. He signed, he thanked me for my service, and he signed one of his cards and so forth, and and he was at the Mothman Festival this last time, and we usually
I
we get together with a bunch of people on Friday night, oftentimes at Village Pizza, which is used to be
Ooh.
Tiny's restaurant. Tiny's restaurant
Oh,
was the scene of a Mothman sighting in '67, and it was actually the
okay.
first place where the Scarberries and the Mallets stopped because Linda had worked there, and she told her boss what had happened. He suggested that they go on to the police station. So anyway,
Wow.
he was there. Some the Mountain Monster guys do make have a presence there in different
Mhm.
festivals,
Mhm.
Tell
and
me
then
more about this biscuit place. Like that sounds
oh,
amazing.
listen, it's just up.
Biscuits.
I've got one just up the street,
Oh,
and this
biscuits.
past week or so, I have been such a slacker and not making any of my own breakfast, and I just drive up the
Uh,
street to
yeah.
Tudor's Biscuit World. Man, you can get the big tater, you can get the little tater, you can get a classic breakfast, you can get the pancake platter, you can get oh man, let me just tell you. You can get
I'm getting in
biscuits.
my car right now and driving down.
Biscuits and gravy, right? And these biscuits, we listen, Jennifer, we measured them. They are nearly one third the size of the state of Nebraska.
Nice. I mean, that would make the trip worth it. Joe and I, we didn't we eat somewhere when we went into Point Pleasant?
Yeah, I
A
was
little
gonna
diner or
mention about
something.
how yeah, we went down there. We were at a convention, I forget where, but we were like, we're by Point Pleasant, so let's go check it out. And we did, and
Yeah.
it's a cool little town, and you can park your car and walk to all these places.
Yes.
Hmm.
You can
Yeah.
sit outside Steve's window and stare at him. And
Well, you'll see my cats staring
yeah,
back.
We
but yeah, I
need
forget
a
where we
cat
went to eat.
cam.
Yeah.
Steve's cat cam.
Yeah.
24/7 on the
Well, we
cat.
I have an old cemetery kind of kitty corner from me that some of it goes back to the Revolutionary War. And
Mhm.
once in a while,
Ooh.
my little Rosie will sit up on the windowsill in the commode and stare in that direction.
Mhm.
Oh,
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
She's probably seeing stuff.
I
That's cool.
as long as he sees it over there, that'll be good.
Right. You never know,
Never
Steve. You get in
know.
those old towns and everything's haunted.
Yeah, maybe, but, my house is pretty small. I don't know that they're gonna, yeah, I don't think they wanna why bother with I mean, they have these big mansions, big, beautiful homes within a walking distance. They need to, just kind of float over there. That'd be good.
Yeah.
Tell
Leave
me
Steve
about
alone. He's got too much research to do.
Yeah. Tell me about the Mothman Festival. Now, me and Jen have been saying we're going
Oh, yeah.
next year. We're going next year. We never end up down there. Tell us a little bit about that before we can let you go here.
It is crazy crowded these days. Like I say,
Yeah.
I've been doing a lot of work for the festival, and you just love it. I was climbing ladders in the TNT area, putting up these giant spider webs,
Mhm.
and one of the places I put it up, they had this, when I used to start the Mothman ride, there was this structure standing there, which was actually blown over in the windstorm. But fortunately, they moved it, even though it's a ruin now. They've moved it over to the main drag when you come in. And I tell
Mhm.
people, I said, "Now look, now we're going to see something off to our your left here, and I'll shine a flashlight on it, and you will be able to tell if you're going to have the intestinal fortitude, the metal to stay on this ride." And I show the flashlight, and it's a two-story outhouse. And so I say, imagine the possibilities. And of course, sometimes the kids would imagine the possibilities. You'd have to
Uh-huh.
kind of curb them a little bit. But so that there's, I was hanging giant spider webs up on that and getting these big furry spiders, and I was adding these big eyeballs to them. I had spiders with three eyeballs or one eyeball. And just a few critters here and there, just to kind of spice it up a bit. But the main deal is to fly over the Mothman. So
Mhm.
so that's again, I've already kind of covered the night, the hayride. Now it's Saturday and Sunday are speakers all day. Was able to speak this year. I spoke a big surprise. It was kind of a refresher on John Keel and the Mothman. You have to talk about John Keel. Really,
Yeah.
he's a
Mhm.
fascinating guy when you talk about the Mothman. Really, really interesting life, and just we get speakers on all kinds of topics. It was held in the uh, what the oh, I can't remember. Was it the retirement center or one of the centers? It was kind of a nice venue. We used to do it in the State Theater, but the
Yeah.
State Theater is in kind of a state of disrepair now,
Oh,
unfortunately. It was such a great place.
Oh, that's too
But
bad.
anyways, it's just down the street. There are vendors way up and down Main Street. Everything, food,
Mhm.
T-shirts, souvenirs, and then on the side road where the Mothman statue is, of course, people line up to get their picture by the statue, front and back. His posterior is about as famous as his front these days. Um, and usually the speakers are there at their tables, and they're
Mhm.
very accessible, and as you know, very interesting people. And so there's that, and it's just it's 2 days of absolute fun, and people are well behaved, and it's a place I tell people, you can talk about these bizarre subjects and the things that you've experienced and the things you believe in without your coworkers and your family members looking at you sideways and saying, "What did you do this weekend? You went there on you went there on purpose? Okay."
yeah. And hopefully we can add a podcast to the scene one of these years. I mean, we say it every year that
Yes.
we're going, but we got to do it. We have to do it.
Well, you have to. Um, it's hard to get in
Mhm.
because I think Jeff starts in March to pick up those. If I'm correct, uh, those people that have been there before, they kind of get first
Mhm.
dibs. If
Yeah.
they've worked out well,
Mhm.
and then he'll add in if there's spaces, and it has kept expanding. So it used to be much closer together, but and if there's so many people there, it is not easy always to find a parking space. But there
Mm.
are plans in the future. It won't be real near future, but they're working on, I think, the across the Kanawha River there, still in West Virginia, in Henderson. I think they're going to be moving a lot of those buildings out of there and putting in a big motel and so forth. They
Oh.
really need parking, and there's the Low Hotel right there in Point
Mhm.
Pleasant. But you guys will have to remortgage both your houses in order to afford a night there. Now, and
Oh my
there are
gosh.
several chain hotels across the river,
Hmm.
but they get really booked up. But if people want to message me on Facebook, I will tell you a place that you might be able to get in. I don't want to
Mhm.
say it publicly, but I will
Sure.
tell you guys off the air where a place you can
Okay.
probably get in. Okay, but
Yeah, and you'd probably our booth would probably be next to the dumpster on Fifth Avenue. You know.
well, I think there's a place on 12th Street, so I wouldn't worry
Yeah.
about it. Yeah.
But Steve,
The
we
mean
enjoy
streets of
every
Point
time.
Pleasant.
Yeah, we enjoy every time we can get together with you and talk. I wish we had more time,
Yeah.
um, but you
Well,
know,
listen, it's always a good time with you guys,
mhm.
even
Yes.
even though we're not
Party.
actually face to face in person.
Not yet. We will.
Yes.
We have a few conventions that we need to.
Convention season comes up and we're
Uh,
traveling, so
are you
I'm
going
sure
to
our
the
paths
Frog?
will cross at the
What about the Frogman convention in March?
I tried. I don't know if they're allowing new vendors yet.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
but we could
I
just go. We could go
Yeah,
to
Oh,
go,
sure,
you
sure.
know?
I'm
like
I'm
the
actually going to be slumming with the spooks, creeps, and assorted devilry gang.
Ooh,
So I,
okay,
I'm
cool.
gonna see if I can. I do have a book out with Mark Randall, the great
Mhm.
graphic artist. It's
Yeah,
called Mothman High Strangeness. He's done all the illustrations. It hits all the high points of the year of the Garuda, the year of the Mothman, Mothman, John Keel, the bridge collapse, the Men in Black, and so forth. And he and I wrote the various pieces for it. Well, they allow me to have. I get a little corner on their table, and
nice.
I get to sell a few. So I get bus fare home.
Great. That's awesome.
but yeah,
We'll be
thanks a lot,
there.
Steve. This was so much fun. I really enjoy it, and we always say you're always welcome on the show anytime. Anytime you see
Yes.
us at a convention, just sit down and start talking, and we'll enjoy ourselves.
We will. There's all kinds of things we haven't covered, and we will do it in the
Yeah.
future sometime.
Yeah.
Yeah, and definitely if there's any updates or anything strange or unusual happens, report back to us ASAP.
Okay.
We
And
need
one
to know.
time, I just want to be on to talk about my cats.
Yeah.
Yes.
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 Cat talk with
Yes.
Steve
Cat
Ward.
talk.
Keel,
Uh,
Awesome.
Rosie, and Willis.
Aw.
and
Send us pictures.
now I think two of them made an appearance today.
Yeah, we saw too.
I was on Mac Maloney's show.
The other
I
one.
also am a correspondent on Mac Maloney's Military X
Mhm.
Files, and I'm afraid Keel exposed himself on the camera. For, Fortunately, it was on Zoom, but it was only audio, so we were okay.
Oh, good.
That's
All right.
hilarious. Well,
Well,
Steve, we really appreciate you being on. You're
Well,
always
thank you for
welcome on
having
the
me.
show. You're one of our founding guests, and we really
mhm.
appreciate 8 years
Well,
later that you're still
yeah.
coming on and telling us all about the
Uh,
cool
oh,
happenings. And
don't tell me how many years. Oh, oh.
oh, okay, sorry, but
Thanks for
anyways,
having me. Really, it was always a good time.
Yeah. And I want to thank you, listener, for tuning in this week. As we always say, please go up on our website. We have a ton of stuff going on there. If you need clothing for the upcoming year, if you want to dress fine, check out Jen's page. She has a Poshmark page. I'll put the link in the description like I always do. Great deals. Jen just lists a whole bunch of new stuff. She's got a whole
yeah,
bunch of new stuff.
holiday things.
Yeah. So
But no,
check out the show
that's
notes. In the show notes, we will have the links to the Mothman Museum. We have the the links to Jen's page, to our page. If you want to donate to us, we have a link there for our
Facebooks.
222 PayPal. And thanks for tuning in. And we will talk to you next week. Goodbye.
Hi, everybody.